Great. I think we'll kick it off. I see a lot of people have joined us. So welcome and thank you for attending today. My name is Martha Shields. I'm the director of the New England Environmental Finance Center. And our mission is to provide free technical assistance throughout New England to provide innovative solutions to fund and finance environmental and climate priorities and to build local capacity in New England to pay for the growing cost of protecting critical environmental resources, and most importantly, to foster resilient communities. The Southeast New England Program Network, or the SNEP Network, is one of our programs, and we are grateful to our partners for making today's webinar happen. We have a great showing today, which reflects the interest, but also the challenge of navigating the unprecedented funding opportunities that are literally pouring down from the federal government to states, to technical assistance providers, and to communities and tribes. It's a lot of information to digest, so we made the goal of today's webinar to help you navigate the variety of funding programs now available specifically in Massachusetts. I want to acknowledge our partners who collaborated to develop this webinar: the Southeast Regional Planning and Economic Development District, or SERPID, the Old Colony Planning Council, the Narragansett Bay Estuary Partnership, and EPA Region 1's Southeast New England program. The plan for today's webinar is that for the next hour, we will have a funding panel describe highlights of their programs. All the slides that you'll see will be shared after the webinar with you. The webinar will remain open until 1:30 to allow for questions after the funders speak. And finally, if you haven't already done so, please sign up for the free workshop that will be live on February 28th at Bridgewater State University. It's from 9 to 12:30 p.m. and we will put the link to register in the chat. It is the second part of this webinar, and you'll get to meet funders at their funding tables and get to talk with them one-on-one. And lastly, I'd like to say that we have live captioning available for this webinar, and all you have to do is to click on the CC bar below the Zoom screen. You'll also see instructions in the chat on how to do that. And now I'd like to introduce Kim Groff, who is our Massachusetts liaison for the SNEP Network, and Danica Belknap, who is an environmental planner at SERPID. So I'm turning it over to you. Thanks, Kim.
Thank you, Martha. Welcome, everybody, today. It's wonderful. We've had a great response to this. And as Martha pointed out, this is part one of a two-part series. In a couple of weeks, we'll be hosting another in-person event at Bridgewater State University. But today we have 9 presenters that will go through a round robin and provide you with highlights of their programs. We're very excited because with the 9 programs represented, we have over $300 million in funding represented in this webinar, which is really exciting. Each grant funder will give you a high-level overview of their programs, priorities, objectives, and requirements, and some key hints on how to make an application most competitive. Many of the funders represent multiple grant programs. They'll each be highlighting one program today. But as Martha pointed out, we will provide a handout that provides a more comprehensive listing of all the programs represented. For those attending today's webinar, we're going to hold questions until the end after we get through the round robin, but feel free to add your questions to the Q&A or the chat and what funding program your question is directed to. And we'll do our best to answer those in real time, but also provide another opportunity at the end of the event. And just another little shout out for the in-person event on February 28th from 9:30 to 12:30 at Bridgewater State University. We will have a funding panel. Mike Durrell will provide a keynote. Mike Durrell is the executive director at Narragansett Bay Estuary Program. And this will provide an opportunity for you to network with the funders and your colleagues. And we're really excited to offer this event. So with that introduction, I'd like to kick it off to our first speaker. Courtney Rocha is representing the Massachusetts Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program. Courtney is the Southeastern Massachusetts Regional Coordinator representing the program. And Courtney, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. Like Kim said, my name is Courtney Rocha. I'm here representing the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, or MVP. We are a grant program that funds, community identified priority actions to address climate change impacts. Where do the priority actions come from? Well, if you're here today, your community is most likely MVP certified, as 97% of the Commonwealth has gone through our planning grant process, and the result is a planning document, which we call summary of findings. That's found on our website if you're interested in what your community, your town or city has identified as your top priorities to address climate change. Then you are able to take those priority actions and apply for our action grant. We fund all stages of projects, from planning, assessments, design and permitting, and on the ground construction. That used to say 1, 2, 3, but now it says 1, 1, 1. And design and permitting and construction, we won't fund them in the same grant cycle. So in order to apply for construction, you must have all your permits in hand. Successful applications meet 9 core principles, which is on our website and directly relates to our scoring system and how our RFR is structured. We emphasize nature-based solutions, engagement, outreach, and environmental justice and vulnerable populations. Other elements of the core principles include strong ties to climate change and climate data, having a clear budget and scope, and demonstrating capacity for the project. As I mentioned earlier, a requirement to apply for MVP is you must be MVP certified, as almost every town or city in the Commonwealth is at this point. Competitive projects have multiple partnerships, thoughtful outreach and education, meaningful community engagement, and support building relationships within the community. I don't mention infrastructure here anywhere, and that doesn't mean we won't fund great infrastructure, but almost every town in the Commonwealth has aging infrastructure and an undersized culvert. So projects that emphasize what I just mentioned tend to rise above the rest. Some important elements for our upcoming RFR: we have at least 20 million available for funding. We fund up to 3 million per municipality, and new this round, we fund political subdivisions of the Commonwealth. So that means that RPAs are eligible to apply, some of them, and for example, Barnstable County is now eligible. If you have questions about your eligibility, please reach out and we can figure it out. We'll fund 5 million up to 5 million for regional projects, and we require a 25% match. That match is lowered to 10% for some communities that meet the requirement for a designated disadvantaged rural community, which will be listed in our RFR. Our RFR will be released mid-March. Then we have a 2-week Q&A period, and then applications are due 8 weeks after that. And MVP is a really difficult program to describe in 5 minutes. So if you have any questions, I really encourage you to reach out to me or any of the regional coordinators, and we're happy to help you figure out whether your project's a good idea, provide technical assistance, or pair you up with a similar community. So thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. Next up, we have Patricia Bowie. She's representing the State Office of Coastal Zone Management. Patricia is a coastal resilience specialist, and she'll be speaking about the Coastal Resilience Grants Program. Welcome, Patricia.
Hi, thank you, Kimberly. Thanks for having me today. I'm really excited to be here talking about CZM's Coastal Resilience Grant Program. The Coastal Resilience Grant Program provides funding and technical assistance to coastal municipalities, as well as eligible nonprofits, to advance a broad range of coastal resilience approaches and climate adaptation initiatives. The eligible project types are listed on the screen. We provide funding for detailed vulnerability and risk assessments, public outreach, proactive planning. So that would include projects that develop, amend, or implement community resilience plans, local ordinances, bylaws, standards, zoning, and other planning tools to reduce exposure of existing and future development to coastal storm damages. Redesigns and retrofits would include engineering and construction projects that upgrade or adapt vulnerable public facilities and infrastructure to reduce long-term flooding and erosion risks. And then, since this is the focus of the webinar today on nature-based, we also do fund shoreline restoration projects. And these would include projects that evaluate suitability, design, permit, construct, and monitor non-structural approaches that restore or enhance natural systems to provide increased shoreline stabilization and flood control. So a few examples of those types of approaches would include beach berm and dune building, coastal bank stabilization, fringing salt marsh restoration, and living breakwater or silt construction. We also fund all phases of work, from planning and feasibility assessment to design and permitting and construction and monitoring phases. And due to the timeline of the projects either being 1 or 2 years, we do encourage applicants to break projects into phases that can be realistically accomplished within the grant timeline. The program goals that we focus on addressing through these projects, they would have to address current coastal flooding and shoreline erosion issues, and also be looking out into the future and how to adapt to future climate conditions, such as sea level rise and increased precipitation. We're also really focused on protecting public facilities and critical infrastructure. That could include things from critical roadways and evacuation routes to wastewater treatment plants, pump stations, and other critical facilities in the community or in the region. We also look to see that projects provide broad public benefits, and that the outcomes of the project do provide benefits to residents and visitors of the community and Commonwealth. We're also really interested to see how proposed projects engage with environmental justice representatives in those communities. So we anticipate our next RFR to come out in the spring. It typically comes out in the April timeframe. Applicants have roughly 6 weeks to submit an application, and following an interagency evaluation period, awarded projects typically begin in September and then have either 1 or 2 years to be completed. Our funding levels are still undetermined. Last year, we were able to award up to $2 million per project. And the year before that, we were able to award $1 million per project. And again, this is a very short time frame to discuss everything about the program. So you can go onto our website and find contact information for myself and our regional coordinators. And I hope to see many of you at the in-person workshop in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Next up, we have Beth Lambert, the Executive Director of the Mass Department of Ecological Restoration, and Beth will be featuring her Culvert Replacement Municipal Assistance Grant Program. Welcome, Beth.
Thank you, Kim. Good morning, everybody. As Kim said, I'm the Director of the Massachusetts Division of Ecological Restoration, which is part of the Department of Fish and Game. And I am here to talk about DER's Culvert Replacement Grant Program. I also want to mention that DER has a number of other grant programs and resources for communities, nonprofits, and others. And those will be available at the in-person workshop coming up and also on our website. But today I'm going to focus on our Culvert Replacement Grant Program because the RFR for that program is going to be opening soon in the next couple of weeks. So what I'm going to do in the next few minutes is just run through some of the highlights of that grant program. The slide shows our website for the program. And if you go to that website, you will find all kinds of information. You'll find frequently asked questions. You'll find a presentation that's a briefing, a full briefing on this grant program. You'll find slides from that briefing. So if this is of interest to you, I encourage you to go straight to our website and find more information so that you can prepare to apply. So a few highlights. The program's official name is the Culvert Replacement Municipal Assistance Grant Program. And what this program does is it provides funding to Massachusetts municipalities and other local units of government and regional units of government, such as RPAs, to replace undersized, perched, or degraded culverts in an area of high ecological value. And the purpose of this funding is really to help towns and other applicants replace these undersized and failing structures with better designed crossings that meet improved structural and environmental design standards and also provide flood resiliency. So we're looking to both restore river habitat here while also benefiting public safety and helping communities adapt to climate change. So a baseline criteria for this program is that only projects that intend to meet the goals of the Massachusetts stream crossing standards will be considered for funding. And so projects should be designed to facilitate fish and wildlife passage, maintain the natural movement of water and the stream bed sediment through the culvert or bridge, and reconnect upstream and downstream habitats. In terms of eligibility, as I said, all Massachusetts municipalities are eligible to apply, as are other units of local and regional government. This will be further detailed on the request for responses, which will be posted on our website and on Combis sometime over the next 2 weeks. Eligible projects must be a culvert or a bridge replacement located on a public way that's owned and maintained by the applying municipality or other eligible applicant, and it must cross a natural freshwater or non-tidal river or stream. So this grant opportunity does not apply to tidal stream crossings, only freshwater. Each applicant can submit one grant application, but applicants can include more than one road stream crossing in that application. If they do that, then those stream crossings must all be on the same stream or same stream connected network. So an applicant can apply for one culvert or crossing, or they can apply for multiple as long as they're on the same stream network. Applicants can apply for any phase of a project, for initial data collection, for design and permitting, or for construction. And in terms of the priorities and the criteria for evaluation, you will find this in the RFR in detail. But in general, we're looking for culverts that are in areas of high ecological value. We're looking for crossings that meet the program priorities, which really means intending to meet the goals of the Massachusetts Stream Crossing Standards. We're looking for projects that demonstrate municipal or applicant support. So it needs to be a high priority for the applicant, and the applicant is committed to managing the project. There needs to be sort of an identified pathway for funding. So what we want to know there is that the applicant is thinking about how they will fund the full cost of the project and how DER's financial assistance will essentially help the applicant get there. the applicant needs to demonstrate that they're ready for the proposed phase of work that they're applying for funding for. So they have a scope and budget and timeline that makes sense. And we're looking for projects that provide multiple benefits. So we're looking for projects that not only benefit the environment, but also public safety, climate resiliency, and particularly socioeconomic benefits to the environmental justice neighborhoods or the surrounding community. One thing that I want to highlight is that there is no match requirement for this grant program. However, it is an incentive grant program, which means that DER will not be able to meet the full cost of the project, and we will be looking for applicants to describe how they intend to, sort of what their funding strategy is and how DER's funding can advance that strategy. In terms of the amount of the grant award, that can really vary based on the needs of the project. In general, awards typically range from around $25,000 to $400,000, depending on the number of structures that the applicant has applied for assistance for, the project phase, and the work that's being proposed in the grant proposal. Just as an example, if the applicant is applying for early field data collection, for a new project, those types of awards typically range from $25,000 to $50,000, depending on how complicated the site is. Whereas awards for design and permitting tend to be higher and may range from $50,000 to $100,000, again, depending on how complex the project is. And then finally, construction projects may receive awards over $200,000 and up to $400,000. So those are examples of the types and amounts of awards that applicants can receive through this culvert replacement program. Further details on all of this will be on our website and in the request for responses when that is posted on Combis. So in conclusion, I would just emphasize that if your community has a failing, poorly designed, or perched culvert that is damaging habitat and whose replacement would have significant public benefit, then this may be a grant program for you. It will be opening up sometime between now and the end of the month. So I encourage you to keep your eyes on our website. We have an email list that includes most DPWs in the state, so they will be getting an email about it, and we will also be tweeting it when it comes out. So thank you very much, and we look forward to reviewing your grant applications.
Thank you, Beth. I'd like to introduce Juan Vega. He's the Assistant Secretary with the Community One Stop for Growth program. This is a program that's a single application portal and collaborative process of grant programs that make targeted investments based on a development continuum. Welcome, Juan. We're happy to have you here today.
Great. Thank you, Kimberly. I appreciate the invitation to participate in the workshop, and certainly it's great to see such a large turnout and level of interest from the region. Happy to participate. So the Community One Stop for Growth, as Kimberly mentioned, is a single application portal. It's a collaborative review process. It's coordinated between the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development, Department of Housing and Community Development, and Mass Development. And the programs listed on the screen here, there are 12 grant programs that are considered and distributed through this Community One Stop application process. The process is essentially based on this development continuum, and what we do with that is we ask communities and applicants in general to think about their development goals in terms of its life cycle, meaning, where are you in the development of that particular project? Are you just starting to convene stakeholders and start thinking about planning a project, or are you on the other end kind of ready to implement, ready to do infrastructure improvements, ready to renovate a building, etc. I would say, generally speaking, in this context for this workshop, none of the programs, none of the grant programs in the One Stop at the moment have nature-based solutions for climate resilience as a primary focus. Having said that, most of these programs are certainly aware and consider the Commonwealth's policy goals around climate resilience, and will certainly entertain, and in many cases have been able to fund projects that are perhaps not a standalone climate project, but certainly something that is supportive of a community's goals related to climate resilience. The types of projects that the One Stop would consider, as I've mentioned, along this continuum, at the bottom of the slide there, the top 3: community activation, placemaking, planning and zoning, and site prep, we consider on that kind of front end of the continuum, where you're perhaps just starting to have community conversations about changing zoning to promote bringing more jobs or promote bringing more housing to your community. Or you have parcels of land that need to be cleaned up in order to attract private investment. Or even before that, you're just trying to convene a coalition made up of your chamber members and nonprofits, and to start having conversations at the community level about what you all want to work on. And so that's kind of the preparing for success side of the continuum. On the other hand, building construction and infrastructure construction provides grants to implement construction projects that are specifically about making improvements to either infrastructure or buildings. In general, I would say all the programs, these are all competitive grant programs. Generally speaking, we don't know what the pool of applicants will look like, and so that drives a bit of how competitive a year might be. But in general, I would say that most of these programs are looking for projects that are advanced in their planning, or if you're coming in for construction dollars, you've done design engineering, you've got some permitting in place. Those are the kinds of things that are going to make a project more competitive. The programs, across the 12 programs, we expect to have about $125 million worth of grants or grant funding available in this current round. As far as matches, only 2 of the programs actually have a match requirement. But in general, all of these programs certainly would welcome a match. We're currently accepting expressions of interest, which is a short form where you outline your project idea in order to get feedback from the 3 agencies about how to pursue funding. And we're accepting those through March 17th. And then the full application deadline, where you would actually make the request for funding, those would be due on June 2nd. Thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you, Juan. So we're going to transition from state programs now into federal programs, and I'd like to turn it over to Danica now as the moderator.
Thank you, Kim. So I'd like to first introduce Tom Ardito to talk about the Southeast New England program, or SNEP Watershed Implementation Grants. This is a federal funding program, and it's administered through Restore America's Estuaries. Tom is the executive director at Restore America's Estuaries. So I will hand it over to you, Tom. Take it away.
Thank you, Danica, and thanks everybody for being here. As Danica said, I'm Tom Ardito. I work for Restore America's Estuaries. I'm not executive director of RAY, but instead I'm director of the SNEP Watershed Implementation Grants Program. So we have a partnership with EPA to administer this grants program. And I should back up a little bit and say that SNEP, Southeast New England program, is a funding program through EPA that supports a number of activities, including the SNEP network, which is helping to host this workshop. And the purpose of SNEP is to foster sustainable ecosystems and communities throughout Southeast New England. And that's defined basically as Cape Cod to Long Island Sound, not including Long Island Sound. So all the coastal waters between Cape Cod and the Rhode Island, Connecticut border, basically, and all the lands that all the watershed lands that drain to those waters. So it includes the islands of, Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, Block Island. It includes inland areas up to Worcester, Mass, Brockton, Mass, which are, part of the Narragansett Bay watershed. It includes all of the Buzzards Bay watershed. It includes the south half of Cape Cod, but in practice, we can say it includes most of Cape Cod. It includes all of Rhode Island. So the SNEP Watershed Implementation Grants is a competitive grants program. It has existed for a number of years and has been pretty consistent in what it does, which is to fund a really wide variety of projects, wide variety of project stages, all aimed at restoring ecosystems and fostering sustainable communities in Southeast New England. So we fund anything from stormwater. We fund a lot of stormwater projects. We fund habitat restoration projects, river restoration, wetland restoration. We fund quite a few environmental justice and urban restoration projects that can be things like green streets. We've funded a number of innovative technologies for addressing water quality, for example, permeable reactive barriers, stuff like that. And we can fund policy initiatives too. For example, developing an ordinance for dealing with, particular type of non-point source pollution or that kind of thing. This year we'll have 2.8 million. It varies a little bit from year to year. Our grants are typically in the 100 to 350, or maybe I should say $100 to $400,000 range. Our maximum grant is $500,000. We also have a category of smaller grants, specifically for what we call peer-to-peer learning initiatives, which can be conferences or workshops or regional initiatives to improve the practice and knowledge around ecological restoration and water quality restoration in the Southeast New England region. I should have probably said earlier, you can go to our website, which is snepgrants.org. I should have put it on this slide, but that'll give you quite a lot of information on the program, annual reports and prior awards. And I should also say that we're releasing an RFP, our request for proposals, for this year on February 21st. The deadline for the first step, which is the letter of intent and quite easy, short application, is April 7th, to be followed by an invited full proposal for those who are selected. So there's a lot more I could say, but feel free to contact me. My email, again, is at snepgrants.org, along with more information on the program. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Tom. So next we are going to hear about the National Coastal Resilience Fund. This is another federal program. It's offered through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. Throw Environmental serves as the liaison for this program in New England. And so Courtney Green, who is a policy analyst at Throw Environmental, will be telling us about this program. Welcome, Courtney.
Hi, thank you, Danica. As she said, my name is Courtney Green. I work with Throw Environmental as a field liaison for the National Coastal Resilience Fund, which is run through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. So NCRF will fund nature-based solutions nationally for all coastal states and territories, tribes, etc. So these projects must be focused on reducing coastal hazards, as well as benefiting fish and wildlife and improving fish and wildlife habitat. And when we're talking about coastal hazards, we're talking about things like flooding, erosion, etc. It will fund projects through community capacity building and planning, site assessment and preliminary design, final design and permitting, all the way up to restoration and implementation, with 1 year of monitoring included for all restoration implementation projects. Please note that no project can cross multiple project categories. So if you're doing the design, they will not fund design build. And when we're talking about preliminary design, that's 30 to 60% typically, whereas final design would be the 90 to 100% design. For restoration implementation projects, it's strongly encouraged that you have your permits in hand when you go to apply. However, they will consider projects without permits in hand if it seems very likely that you're going to get the permit. So if you've already started the conversations and are submitting the application for the permit, if it seems likely that you're going to receive it, then they will consider that. Additional program priorities, in addition to the coastal hazards and fish and wildlife habitat, is nature-based solutions. So things like wetland buffers, living shorelines, those types of projects need to be included in the proposal. They will consider hybrid projects. However, they will not fund just gray infrastructure. And if there is a gray infrastructure portion to your project, then that portion will not be funded by NCRF dollars. It would need to have other funding that's contributing to the gray infrastructure portion of it. Projects that provide meaningful engagement with the community, especially underserved communities and tribes, and projects that advance innovative, transferable, or scalable and sustainable solutions are more competitive. So a pilot project, unless you have a clear path set forward for how you're going to scale it up and transfer lessons learned, for example, to other projects or other locations, then it would not be as competitive as a larger scale project. There's approximately $140 million total in funding, and awards will typically range from $100,000 to $1 million for planning and design stage projects, where they can range anywhere between $1 million to $10 million for restoration implementation projects. There's no cap on what that funding can be, that those are just the averages that they've seen over the last few years. The RFP release date is coming up very soon. So it's going to be released mid to late February. So over the next week or two, we're expecting that RFP to be released. Pre-proposals will be due April 12th, I believe. And keep in mind that it is a two-stage proposal. So you would have the pre-proposals, which are going to be due in April. If that proposal is accepted, then the full proposals would be due at the end of May. And then if your full proposal is accepted, then that's usually announced around November. If anyone would like to contact me for more information, please feel free to do that, Courtney@throwenvironmental.com. And we're happy to set up a discussion if you want to talk about specific projects or if you have any additional questions about the fund. Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. Next, I would like to introduce MassDEP. Judith Rondo is the non-point source watershed specialist and outreach coordinator at MassDEP from the Watershed Planning Program. They offer a few different grant opportunities to help manage non-point source pollution and managing stormwater. So today, Judith is going to be talking to us about the 319 non-point source program. So welcome, Judith, and take it away, please.
Thank you very much. As Donica said, I'm Judy Rondo, and I am the non-point source outreach coordinator for the Watershed Planning Program at MassDEP. So we have 3 grant programs, the Clean Water Act Section 319 and 604B grants, which are offered through the Watershed Planning Program, and the MS4 Municipal Assistance Program, which is offered through the Stormwater Program. I'll be providing an overview of the 319 grant, and you can refer to your handouts for information about the 604B and the MS4 Municipal Assistance Program grants. So MassDEP offers the 319 grant annually. We typically have about $1.5 to $2 million in available funding. There's no limit on the amount of funding a grantee may apply for, and proposals typically range from about $50,000 to $500,000. The 319 program requires that the awardee provide 40% of the total project cost in non-federal match. However, at this time, we are looking into identifying a mechanism so we can reduce the match requirement for certain types of grant proposals. We anticipate the release of the fiscal year 2023 request for responses, or RFR, in early spring of 2023. Prior to the release, we'll hold a pre-RFR meeting where we will review the RFR, and prospective applicants will have the opportunity to ask questions about the RFR and their projects. We're also able to individually meet with applicants to discuss their projects up until the time the RFR is released. So if you're planning a project, don't hesitate to reach out and discuss it with Malcolm Harper, our 319 program coordinator, or me. Once the RFR is released, applicants will have a month to prepare and submit their proposals. The 319 grant program funds two types of projects: implementation and non-implementation. Implementation projects are those that involve the installation of structural best management practices to improve or restore impaired waters. Non-implementation projects are more programmatic in nature and fall into two categories: capacity building and healthy watershed protection. Within the capacity building category, our regional non-point source coordinator program funds regional planning agencies and other regional organizations to conduct urban and agricultural NPS management. The regional coordinators work with towns and other stakeholders to conduct planning and implement BMPs and provide technical support such as grant writing and watershed-based plan development. The environmental justice coordinator is new in this year's RFR. Similar to the regional coordinator category, environmental justice coordinators will work specifically in environmental justice communities to develop capacity and identify projects that will directly benefit the community. You can identify environmental justice communities, using the Commonwealth's environmental justice populations in Massachusetts, that's a mouthful, map viewer. Additional project types in the capacity building category include education and outreach projects that develop new or innovative guidance or practices, and projects that support the development of stormwater collaboratives. The healthy watershed protection category covers implementation projects that protect non-impaired and high-quality waters from the effects of non-point source pollution. Eligibility for the 319 program is quite broad. Any municipal, public, or private entity is eligible to apply. Our primary program priority is the restoration of impaired waters. You can find a listing of impaired waters in the 2018-2020 Integrated List of Waters at the Watershed Planning Program's webpage. Additional priorities this year will include projects that benefit environmental justice communities and projects that incorporate active and inclusive community engagement. For most implementation projects, we require that an EPA 9-element watershed-based plan be completed before any implementation work begins. There are exceptions for projects in environmental justice communities. If you're planning such a project, check with us to see if you're eligible for the exception. And additionally, we may be able to provide watershed-based plan development support. So again, check with us to see if you're eligible for that. And finally, the most competitive proposals will be those that are clear and concise, clearly define the water quality problem as well as the proposed solutions, demonstrate significant pollutant load reductions, and are cost effective. So that's it for a brief overview of the Mass DEP 319 program. Thanks, and I'll look forward to questions at the end of the program.
Thank you, Judy. So at this point, we're going to transition into a few regional programs. So not necessarily every community in Massachusetts is eligible for these programs. They're based on regional boundaries or watershed boundaries in the Southeastern region. So I'm going to hand it over to Kim to kick off this portion.
Thank you, Danica, and thank you for identifying that these were regional. We have two estuary programs in Southeastern Mass. One is the Narragansett Bay Estuary Program, which includes part of Mass and also most of Rhode Island. And then we also have the Buzzards Bay National Estuary Program. So first up is Darcy Young. She is the Watershed Outreach Manager at the Narragansett Bay Estuary Program, and she will be speaking about habitat and public access planning in the Narragansett Bay region. Thank you, Darcy.
Thanks very much, Kim, and thanks to all the funders and participants for being here today. It's really wonderful to hear about all the different opportunities that are presented today. Again, my name is Darcy Young. I'm with the Narragansett Bay Estuary Program. And for those of you not familiar with us, as Kim mentioned, we're one of several national estuary programs working to restore coasts and their watersheds in southern New England. We're a partnership-based nonprofit organization that's focused on water quality, wildlife, and quality of life in the greater Narragansett Bay region, which encompasses not only the majority of Rhode Island, but also communities in Massachusetts and Southeastern Connecticut. We receive annual funding from the Environmental Protection Agency and the Southeast New England program. And each year we redistribute a significant amount of that support through funding opportunities like this one that I'm highlighting today. This opportunity, which we plan to formally release later this spring, will seek watershed and coastal habitat restoration planning projects from stakeholder engagement through permitting. We're specifically looking for projects that emphasize public access to nature, and projects taking place in priority environmental injustice areas will receive additional points during our scoring process. Projects must take place within our watershed area. We've got a map up there on the screen. I know it might be a little bit challenging to determine if your community is part of that, or if your project would be eligible. So what you can do is you could use that QR code that I've put up there on the slide that takes you to an interactive map on our website where you can actually search your project address in that map. Or if you're still confused, please feel free to reach out to me anytime and I'd be happy to help you figure it out. And in terms of eligible entities, those can include, but aren't necessarily limited to municipalities, state and local government agencies, tribes, interstate agencies, nonprofit organizations, and academic institutions. We do ask that recipients are able to accept and manage federal funds, and we're expecting to require about 25% match on this application. I also want to add that we're in the fortunate position of expecting significant additional funding for the next 4 years through the bipartisan infrastructure law. And we do plan to put as much of that money on the ground as we can. So even if this particular opportunity isn't a fit for you, please keep in touch with us for future opportunities. Unlike most of the other programs highlighted here today, at the Narragansett Bay Estuary Program, we don't currently have a rotating annual grant program where we're looking for the same priorities year to year. So that just really highlights the need to keep in touch with us and keep an eye out for our opportunities, because they do range depending on what opportunity we're offering. And lastly, I wanted to mention that beyond funding opportunities like this one, we also provide free services such as convening, public outreach, and GIS mapping to the communities in our watershed regions. So again, please just reach out to us with your ideas and your needs. We'd love to hear from you. With that, I'll say thank you, and I hope to meet many of you at the February 28th in-person event at Bridgewater State.
Thank you, Darcy. So our next speaker is Sarah Williams. Sarah Williams is a regional planner with the Buzzards Bay National Estuary Program, and she will be talking about the Buzzards Bay Watershed Infrastructure and Comprehensive Conservation and Management Plan Grant Support Program. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, and thanks for the introduction. So the Buzzards Bay National Estuary Program provides financial and technical resources to municipalities for projects that help meet our goals to protect and restore water quality and living resources in Buzzards Bay and its surrounding watershed. This is a new grant program we're running that's being funded through the federal bipartisan infrastructure law, and we are receiving those funds through a cooperative agreement with EPA. We anticipate that we're going to have 5 rounds of funding. The first round actually just closed on February 1st, and we received over $2 million in requested funding, and we're in the process of going through applications right now. We are expecting to run another grant round early in the spring, and then we'll be running a yearly program for the next 3 years after that should come out in the spring. Each round will have roughly $700,000 available. There's no limit on the number of proposals that can be submitted by an individual entity, but no applicant can receive more than 2 proposals being funded. No project can be funded for more than $375,000. And there's a cap of $400,000 for total project award if you submit 2 projects that were funded. Proposals have to be submitted electronically. There's no match required, which is great, but we do require a leverage fund report to be submitted at the end of the project to meet our federal reporting requirements to EPA. Funds are distributed on a reimbursement basis, and contracts will generally run from 12 to 18 months, depending on the time period of when everything gets approved and how much time each applicant needs to complete their project. I'm going to quickly run through because I had to abbreviate the projects and the project type. So I'll read what they are in full, just so you're aware of them. So it's one is feasibility and design of stormwater facilities to treat discharges to impaired surface waters. 2, construction of stormwater facilities to treat discharges affecting surface waters. 3, support for tasks to achieve MS4 compliance other than required routine maintenance. Feasibility studies and conceptual plans to enhance nitrogen removal from municipal wastewater treatment facilities using innovative or unconventional approaches. 5, restoration of wetlands, habitat, and migratory fish passage. 6, construction of a boat pump out facility in a municipality or harbor where none exists. 7, creation of online reporting systems for tracking of operation, maintenance, monitoring of innovative and alternative septic systems. 8, projects through direct action, mitigate or restore coastal waters, coastal resources, fresh waters, or freshwater resources impaired by pollutant loading. And then the last 2 categories are eligible, but they're of a lower funding category and won't receive as many points, so won't be considered as competitive, but they're still eligible. And that would include land, open space, or habitat preservation, acquisition, or protection, or other activities in support of the Buzzards Bay Comprehensive Conservation and Management Plan. So for our program, only municipalities are eligible, and only municipalities in the Buzzards Bay watershed. That includes Acushnet, Bourne, Carver, Dartmouth, Fairhaven, Fall River, Falmouth, Gosnold, Marion, Mattapoisett, Middleborough, New Bedford, Plymouth, Rochester, Wareham, and Westport. So unfortunately, if you're not on that list, you're not eligible for our program. And projects must actually lie within the Buzzards Bay watershed. There's a map on our website, and you can use the QRC code to go look for more information on that. But municipalities can also partner with other entities like nonprofits, universities, private organizations, but the municipality has to be the one to sign the contract and the one to receive the funds. Because our funding is coming from the bipartisan infrastructure law, we need to meet their funding goals, which include investing public dollars efficiently and equitably, building resilient infrastructure that can withstand the impacts of climate change, and to invest in disadvantaged communities. So the most competitive proposals will be for projects that meet these bipartisan infrastructure law goals, as well as state and federal environmental justice goals, and those that provide a benefit to the Buzzards Bay or the Buzzards Bay watershed. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. So this concludes the round robin portion of the webinar. And I'd just like to take a moment. We really stayed on time, so I want to thank all those grant funder participants that put the effort in to attend this event and prepare for it. Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank all the sponsors, the SNAP Network, OCPC, SERPED, Narragansett Bay Estuary for working very hard to pull this together. I know there was a lot of information presented here, and if we could put that link in the chat to the comprehensive list of programs so folks can download that and really digest the information that was presented today. And then I also just want to announce again that we will have an in-person event where you can meet the funders directly on February 28th at Bridgewater State University from 9:30 to 12:30. And if we could put the link in the chat for the registration for that event, I strongly encourage you to sign up for that. It's a lot of information to take in, and it's best to speak directly with the funders if you have an opportunity to do so. And for those of you that would like to hang on, we are going to have an optional 30-minute question and answer session. I would ask that folks just put their questions in the Q&A or in the chat, and what program it's directed to, and we will answer any questions that you have. Thank you again for the attendees, and thank you for all the speakers.
Thanks, everyone. So I do have a few questions that are queued up in the Q&A box. If you have additional, please continue to add those. We'll go through them as they come in. But I'll start with what we have so far. So this one I'm hoping that Juan can answer. It's about the one-stop program. Do you know if the other state programs that we've discussed today will eventually be incorporated into that one-stop platform?
Wow, that's an interesting question. And the answer is not likely. These programs are pretty discrete. I would say the Community One-Stop for Growth itself is designed by HED to kind of combine our economic development grant programs. And essentially it came to be because a lot of communities were applying to these multiple programs, but the timing of when the 12 RFPs would go out never kind of matched what the community was trying to do. And so if you missed one deadline, then you had to wait another year to jump on to the next round. And we also, we found that if the program folks from each of the 12 programs kind of consider these applications more holistically, they could make more targeted investments and make these projects more competitive. As mentioned, a lot of the grant program, all these great programs that we just heard about, these are discrete within various different secretariats, et cetera. And certainly, all the agencies are, I know that some of the other agencies are considering how to create some similar thing in terms of a single entry point for a lot of these programs, but so many of them are just so specific and discrete and targeted to certain, certain communities, certain regions, et cetera. They may not fit. The one stop at the moment is statewide. So you wouldn't easily be able to put a single regional program into that. Not to say that I think a lot of our colleagues in other offices and state agencies are thinking about how to improve access to our grant programs in general. But no, I would say no, these programs are not kind of targeted to go into this one stop. There could be other one stops developed in the similar vein.
That's great. Thanks, Juan. So another question was about phosphorus, and I'll pose this to anyone on here. Do anyone's programs fund phosphorus removal from septic system contamination? Judy, I see that you came on, so go ahead.
Yeah, we have funded through the 319 program. We funded research into the removal of various pollutants from septic systems. I would, if you have a specific project in mind, I would suggest that you attend our pre-RFR meeting when we are ready to have it. We're still working on the RFR. And you could bring that question up then, and then you could discuss, as I said, if you have a specific project in mind. And you can email me. I wanted to add at the end of my presentation, and I forgot that if anyone would like to be on our notification list, you can email me at judith.rondo@mass.gov, and I'll put you on our list so that you'll get the notifications for the RFR meeting and the grant release and whatnot.
Thank you, Judy. I'll also point out that one of the handouts that we shared in the chat that Leah sent includes contact information for each program. So if you want to get in touch with any of the speakers or learn more, you can find out who's the best person to reach out to in that handout. Did any other programs want to jump in on the phosphorus question before I move on to the next? Okay, so next up, I will pose this question to some of the state agencies that are on here. In response to some of the federal changes that have taken place regarding calculating benefit and cost analysis, have there been any changes to any of your programs or how awards are funded in response to that?
This is Beth from the Division of Ecological Restoration. I just wanted to say that that will not affect any of DER's grant programs.
Thank you, Beth. Did anyone else have any know of how any impacts that might happen as a result?
It
Trisha?
also, yep, it also won't affect the Coastal Resilience Grant Program. We don't look at the FEMA BCA in our evaluation of the proposals.
Yeah, and in the 319 program, I don't believe that will impact that as well.
Okay, thank you. Oh, and then in response to that, the new calculations may promote nature-based solutions. So I don't know if anyone wants to speak to that more. I don't know how that will impact the calculations, but I guess they do benefit nature-based solutions. So maybe if your program is favoring nature-based solutions, it may impact there. Did anybody else want to add any comments in regards to that? Beth, go ahead.
I guess I would say my understanding is that that is part of the FEMA programs. And so the only state programs that are directly linked to FEMA would be programs through the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency, and applications to that require applicants to follow this prescribed cost benefit analysis. For us, we are always looking at that type of in concept, like what are the benefits and what is the cost. So that's an important concept for how we think about proposals, but we don't have like a required methodology similar to that FEMA benefit cost analysis that we require people to do.
Thank you, Beth. So I will point out, we don't have any other open questions right now, but there were a few questions that the panelists answered directly. So if you open that Q&A button on the bottom, you can look at the answered questions. So there's additional information in there. If you have additional questions, please feel free to continue sending them. I don't think any came in the chat, but I don't know if Kim or others who were monitoring the chat noticed any questions, if you want to point them out. Does not look like there was anything. Oh, go ahead, Kim.
Danica, I just looked and I didn't see anything in the chat as far as questions.
Okay. So then I will, we can give it another minute to see if anybody wants to submit anything, but did any of the speakers want to expand on any of the answers they already gave? If you wanted to add anything additional based on the ones that you responded directly to, just for the benefit of everyone, I'll give you an option to do that now.
Hi, Danica. I'd be happy to speak a little bit more to the question about, so our project will fund, our grant program will fund anything that has to do with the community's priority action. And Jason asked a great question, and it was, if a project was not initially identified as a community priority, is it necessary to amend the findings to include it? And if so, what is the process? And that's a great question because many of these planning documents were done 4 to 5 years ago, and a lot of them are out of date, and or the community has already completed them, or they're no longer relevant. So every year to maintain MVP designation, the community would have to submit a yearly report. And in that report, if you can demonstrate that a new project was identified through a community outlet or some sort of consensus building, that it's not just one department or one department's idea, it's really a community derived project, that will suffice as an eligible action grant that has to do with climate change. Also, if you look back at the priority actions, many of them are things like improve water quality or and manage stormwater. So there can be a lot of ties to your report or elements within your planning grant that speak to whatever you would like to bring to MVP in the newest round. And then we're also rolling out MVP 2.0 very shortly, which will be our process for updating your planning grant priority action. So be on the lookout for MVP 2.0. And if you have any questions about that, I would encourage you to reach out to your regional coordinator.
Thank you, Courtney. I still have not seen any additional questions, so I'll give one last opportunity if any of the speakers wanted to just hop on and say any last final comments. All right, so not seeing anything else come in, I want to just reiterate everything Kim said and thank everyone for your time today, to all of our speakers for sharing information about your program, and for all of the participants who spent your lunch break with us today. We very much appreciate it. And just a reminder, if you're interested in diving in further and learning more about these programs and meeting some of the representatives who are here today and more, there will be additional programs who did not participate in today's webinar that will also be at the in-person event on February 28th. The link to register for that is in the chat, and we hope to see you all then. So thank you very much and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.